What we know, a lot of Zimbabweans have moved out. One of the biggest streams of revenue is money coming back into the country from Zimbabweans living abroad. Zimbabwe was once known as the bread basket, but it suffered decades of economic decline. The former president pursued policies including the seizure of those commercial farms, money printing that led to hyperinflation. The country has not been able to borrow since 1999. It owes the World Bank, the African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank money. According to some estimates, the unemployment rate may be as high as 95%. And we were speaking about Zimbabweans living in South Africa. Well, what more for the Zim economy? Can it recover? Joining us now, political economist Dr. Peter Karungu. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Doctor, was President Robert Mugabe to blame for the economic collapse? Can it all change now that he's gone?
I think to start with, I must say, I always give a short perspective of Zimbabwe we knew. In 1989 to 1991, Zimbabwe had two statistics with respect. The first one, it was the country with Singapore and Taiwan with the highest per capita surplus. In other words, whatever they exported minus what they imported, the surplus was so high, divided by the population, it was the second highest in the world. Wow. Number one. Number two, still is one of the countries with the highest literacy level worldwide, even today. Number three, it still had one of the most well-structured infrastructure. Even today, we can argue it still has. So, what am I saying? Given what I said, it can be better. A, because it has some of the most brightest people across the board. It has a country with the best climate in terms of agricultural productivity. It had minerals of any untold proportion. So I think we're going to see it. It will change. Why did it get where it was? I will not say that's not my part.
I'm so interested that you've raised education levels. Is that educational base still there? The base to develop skills, to attract skills back into the country?
There is an argument across the board. If Zimbabwean were all 100% pack and leave South Africa, I think it would cause a little bit of professional decline.
Lose out on those skills. I think we don't
They are skilled, they are hardworking, and I have been teaching adverts for the last 20-something years, and I can tell you those kids have basic mathematics background of disproportional worldwide.
Say all the right economic decisions are made now. How long could it take for the economy to recover?
I think to start with, remember, in the worst scenario in 2008, the GDP has almost collapsed. Between 2008 and 2014, that's about 6 years, the GDP grew by 3 times. And it's still going. It had hyperinflation. Today the inflation is very managed. So it can only get better. But what do they need to do? Let's start with that, because that's the policy discourse. First, we need to get an environment that is conducive for productivity, that is conducive for people to invest. We got to get an environment that which says anything that is possible, you not get punished for where you come from. We got to get people to run away from polarization. I'm Shona, I'm Debele, I'm that. We need to cut that. We need also to get people to start thinking short, medium, and long term. What does that mean? Our political dispensation should not be opportunistic. It needs to look at the country in terms of the trajectory. If they think that way, with the right policies down the line, I can tell you in about 10 years, this country will be where it used to be, and you're going to see everybody going there.
What did you think about Mr. Tendai Biti's suggestion that Zimbabwe uses the rand, joins countries using the rand?
In the short term, that would work. Let me tell you the truth. What he was saying is, in the
short... So we get rid of the dollar, the bond notes causing so much trouble.
Correct, yeah. But in the end, every state, and there is an issue there, as an economist, would guide against. The moment you have a political entity, in other words, you set your political entity, that political entity should also be complemented with what we call monetary sovereignty. You can't have political discussion in Zimbabwe setting a different policy framework and still depend on the monetary sovereignty of South Africa in the long term. In the short term, yes, but in the long term, Zimbabwe needs to own its own monetary sovereignty.
In the short term, Zimbabwe needs money. It's in arrears. So how does it get that funds, and how does it get investors keen to come in immediately?
You ask me, if I had money, I would be the first to go. But listen.
To go in?
To go in. The truth is,
that's a good sign. Convince everybody that it's worth it.
Yeah. We will do it. But let's understand that from 2001, that country was indebted to IMF. They have already paid the debt already. That's number one. Number two, they have already gotten to a position in which, in my view, they have managed to control inflation. They have managed to literally, in my view, to come up with a policy discourse that was entertaining investors, but mainly in mining. But it never spread out across the board. So we need to be able to put that. Remember, barely 3 years ago, with all the problem in agriculture, they had almost surplus agricultural output. So complement that with good political discourse of what we are seeing today, we can only ask for the better. I'm excited about Zimbabwe.
That is so good. And you've spoken about mining. Zimbabwe had incredible laws which protected local investors. Do you think it can find that balance to protect local investors, or does it have to change that regime completely? Because we know it has been a deterrent.
Look, it is in the common interest of global trajectory of humanity that the indigenous people have to benefit from the resources underneath within their boundaries. That's a fact. It cannot be negotiated. Meaning, in the long term, we need to be able to come with measures that means the gold potential in Zimbabwe benefit not only the investors themselves, but also the indigenous people. We can't quarrel with that. However, it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. Which comes first, the indigenous people or the investors? It is the investors knowing in the long term they have to empower the people of the country for there to be security. Common sense says the greatest threat of mankind today is nothing else, it's inequality. Even if we get a new change and people are so poor, majority, and people are made helpless in economic terms, we can't afford to see sustainable, democratic dispensation of our wish.
Emerson Mnangagwa, finally we're running out of time. What do you think of him? Some say he knows business.
I wouldn't talk politics, I'm an economist, but I would say any change in Zimbabwe is positive, except to tell the Zimbabwean three things. First, patience, hard work, and run away from polarizing yourself against tribes. Also remember, you are accommodated by the diaspora. Let the diaspora come and invest with you, because I know a little bit of that country. They can be a little bit inward looking. The moment you say, listen, it is not who you are, it's what you can bring on board with a commitment to empower others, not you alone.
You've convinced me. I would invest if possible. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
That was Economist Dr. Peter Karungu.